Good morning. Welcome to Westbridge Church. Man, it's so great to see everybody. I want to say hello to everybody joining us online. Great option if you have, if you're staying at home or also in the parent viewing rooms. Great option if you have small kids that you prefer to keep with you during the service. And man, thanks for bearing with us on parking. I know that we've got people parking on curbs and streets and everywhere. We've got plenty of room in here for seats, but also the parking and kids areas are where we hit our pinch points. So thanks for your patience with us. Just real quick, zero pressure, but there are lots of seats at 8 a.m. Just want to let you know that. I just want, if you're like, I'm not really a crowd person, 8 a.m. might be your jam. Otherwise, just so you know, Thursday nights at 7, also plenty of seats. And so those are our two lowest services, but these are primetime services. Love to have you here, and but you just got to know there's going to be a lot of people at these ones. So if you're a crowd person, great. If not, you can always check out one of those other options. Real quick, before we jump in, looks like this in the seat in front of you, Westbridge Life Groups. This is a great way to get connected with other people, and this is in the seat right in front of you. If you're like, I would love to learn more about it. This doesn't sign you up. This is just like an interest form that says, man, I'm just curious. Like, here's the groups I might be interested in, and you can just drop this in the giving station. And then Kristen Fisher, our Life Groups Director, will help get you connected, help find groups that are a fit for you, and get you connected. All of those groups start in just a few weeks. And so that's exciting. I want to encourage you to do that. If you have questions, Kristen's hanging out right in the lobby, right by the Life Group sign, and go and ask her your questions, and she'd love to connect with you, I'm sure. So we're starting a series today called Picture Perfect. And I love this because growing up as a kid, like one of the things that happened in our family every year was Family Picture Day. It was a big deal to my mom and dad. And my mom and dad had this idea that you got to create the perfect family portrait. I think a lot of people did this. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, you had two options. If you had a lot of resources as a family, you went to Olin Mills. I don't know if anybody remembers this. We did not, so Penny, and we sat on these little blocks of carpet, and the JCPenney guy would come out and try to direct you and be like, okay, you move over there, right? And the whole thing was kind of a debacle. Like, my parents thought this would be amazing, and at different times we would have different themes even, where we would all dress alike, and like we'd all be like decked out in denim like we were the CEO of Levi and Strauss or something like that. And I would submit that if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, like, I'm sure you have a picture of your family in denim. I think that's what everybody did. I would say if you don't have a picture of your family in denim, did you even grow up in the 80s and 90s? Because that was the thing, right? And no matter how picture perfect my parents had it in their mind, there would always be something that would ruin it. Always. My parents are just sweating, as they're trying to get us kids to stop fighting with each other. And they're like, stop touching your sister. And you're wrinkling your blouse. I told you to wear a different sweater, And then there's this moment where you've got to smile and you've got to look at the camera and you're sitting on this awkward thing, wearing an itchy sweater, trying to convince the whole world that you weren't just fighting in the station wagon the entire way over. And like, everything's good, and we're gonna enjoy this, and we're gonna be really happy, right? And we're gonna have this moment together. And it was like my parents' goal was that the JCPenney guy would be like, this is beautiful. We would love to use your family portrait in the frames that we sell in the store. Could we do that? Like they thought that's how it would go. And in reality, a lot of our pictures ended up looking like something off of awkwardfamilyphoto.com, which I don't know if you've ever seen this website, but I'd love to show you. Look at these guys. That is a handsome bunch, I mean, again, you gotta all wear the same clothing together, right? Here's another one. Here's a family, and this is what I love about this picture. Number one, the eyes. The mom and the daughters have all the same eyes, but the background was always the same in these pictures, right? It was just this like weird, nondescript, vague background where you're like, where are they? They're in JCPenney, that's where they are. And then check out this picture, super grainy, super old picture. Yeah, that's my family. Yeah, this is a 9-year-old Jeremiah right there. There you go. Yeah, thrilled. He's thrilled to be there, let me tell you. And in every generation, we try to capture the best image, the best version of ourselves, whether it's Olin Mills or glamour shots. If you remember glamour shots, MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, now you got all kinds of filters, and we try to create these highlight reels of our lives so that everyone can see these polished versions. And the problem is, it kind of leads us to believe that everybody else's life is picture perfect. And in reality, we know there is no such thing as a picture-perfect family, right? And that's really the heart behind this series. It's helping us to navigate the different seasons of parenting because we all need some help along the way, and we're all a little dysfunctional, if we're honest. And so here's where we're going over the next 4 weeks, and here's what I want to encourage you with. Some of you would say this, all right, we're not even parents. Like, we're here at this parenting series. What are we doing here? We're not even parents. If you're planning to ever be a parent someday, this series is for you. Some of you would say, we're empty nesters. Like, this is behind us. We're not in this season anymore. But you have influence in the lives of other people who have kids, or you have influence in the lives of kids somewhere along the way. And so my encouragement to you is hang in here with us through this series, through these 4 weeks. Even if you're like, we don't have kids, or we don't have kids anymore that are in our house, because here's why. We think that some of the principles that we can pull from this series will be really, really helpful for when you do have kids someday, or for the influence that you have in kids in your lives today. And here's the thing, you might not even be a faith person. You might be like, all right, listen, I don't even know where I stand with God or church or faith. I just know I need some help with parenting. So that's why I came. I'm gonna encourage you, give us the next 4 weeks. And if after these 4 weeks, you're like, wow, that place, that dude's a crock, what a sham, I'm never going back there, I can respect that. But what if in the next 4 weeks you could pick up some principles that will really help you in parenting? So here's where we're going. Today we're gonna talk about scream-free parenting. Like, how do we parent our kids without losing our minds? Secondly, next week we're gonna talk about 4 things that every kid needs from loving adults in their lives. The third week, we're gonna talk about how do I parent with the end in mind? Like, the goal is like, all right, here's where I want our kids to end up, and so how do we kind of reverse engineer that and get them there? And then the very last week, 5 commitments that all parents should make to themselves. And then after that, we're going to do a whole new series. You won't want to miss that, life group season, all that kind of stuff. So let me kick off with this verse. This is from the Psalms. King David writes this. He says, children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from him. Children born to a young man are like arrows in a warrior's hands. How joyful is the man whose quiver is full of them. And he's talking about parents. I know it's a lot of masculine language, but he's talking about parents. He says it's like arrows in the hands of a warrior. Joyful is the one whose quiver is full. And I know there are moments where you want to take that arrow and shoot it into the next county. But here's the reality. Ultimately, children should be seen as a gift from God. So how many of you have been parents for 3 years or less? Let's see it. Yeah, suckers. You got no idea what you're in for, right? How many of you, you're parents of teenagers? Lift them nice and high. Yeah, life is chaos right now. You've never been more confused than you are right now. Hormones are just all over the place. In fact, Mark Twain said this about teenage years. He said, when a kid turns 12, you should keep him in a barrel and feed him through a knothole. And then he said, when they turn 16, plug the knothole. Wow, Mark Twain might be onto something. How many of you are empty nesters, right? Empty nesters. Yeah, look at these people. Look at how happy they are. Look at the smiles on their faces. They come to church, right? They stroll in all casual. Man, it's amazing. How many of you are grandparents? Yeah, you just sugar them up and send them on home, right? How many of you, you're what used to be empty nesters, and now you are no longer empty nesters? Anybody? Yeah, we call that boomerang parents, right? Because you sent them out into the world and they came right back to you. And you're like, oh, well, I remember when we were empty nesters, right? Even if you're thinking, man, parenting isn't my season, this won't apply to me, I want to encourage you. You interact with kids somewhere in your life. These principles will help you. Now, we have been married for 26 years, my wife and I. We've got an 11-year-old son, a 17-year-old son, a 19-year-old daughter, a 22-year-old daughter, one son-in-law, and our first grandkid on the way. So we are in the thick of it. Every single season you can imagine, we're there with you, okay? So this is not like, hey, let me tell you how amazing we are. This is like, we are fellow travelers, all right? We're trying to navigate all this with you. And what's crazy is, I've been doing this for a long time, like 28 years I've been a pastor. When I first started doing parenting talks, I didn't have kids, so I knew it all. So it'd be like this, hey, here's 10 principles for raising amazing kids, Then we had a kid. And then it was like, here's 7 suggestions for raising good kids. And then we had a second kid, and then we're like, here's 3 things that may or may not help. I don't know. Hopefully we all survive. And so there's enough dysfunction in any family to make us feel frustrated, to make us feel like a failure. But here's why I say all that. I want you to know you're not alone. You are not alone, okay? And one of the best things you can do is lean into community, lean into a group of other people who are all trying to navigate this together. We're all just an imperfect group of people doing our best to help each other move forward. And part of the reason that parenting is so tough is because, one, it seems like we're constantly chasing our kids into the next season, right? It's like, okay, they're a toddler. I just got the toddler thing figured out. Suddenly they're a preschooler and they change on you. And then you're like, okay, I got the preschool thing figured out. And then they grow a little bit and then they're in grade school and they change on you. And it feels like you're always chasing your kids into the next season of life, right? And the other thing is, not only that, you get one kid figured out and then you have another kid. That kid's totally different, right? It's like they all have such different personalities and different character traits and different talents and quirks and different likes. You can raise all your kids the exact same way, and they turn out completely different. It's amazing when I look around our table at home, it's like, how did these kids all come from the same DNA? And some of it starts at an early age, right? Some kids they come out of the womb with a rose in their mouth, and they're like, I love everybody. Other kids come out with a cigar in their mouth, and they're like, hey, next few years are gonna be tough on all of us. And it starts at an early age, right? And then we just know the parenting dynamic is always shifting. You think about it from generation to generation, and there's single parents and blended families and co-parenting and joint custody, and it's become more and more and more complicated. And so we just believe children are a gift from God, but at the same time, parenting is such an enormous challenge that the question becomes this: how do we navigate being a parent in a way that is best for our kids, but we don't lose our minds in the process? And so I want to give you some principles today that we've learned over the years that come from the scriptures, that if we can put these things into practice, it will really help us to navigate these seasons of parenting. Number one, you should know this: your role is not to protect your kids, it's to prepare them. Your role as a parent isn't to protect your kids. And here's what's interesting. This is all of our natural tendency. The natural tendency of every parent, us included, is to protect our kids. We don't want them to get hurt. We don't want them to experience rejection. We don't want them to be on losing teams. We don't want them to experience pain. But your main objective is not to protect them from life. Rather, it is to prepare them for life. That's the objective, that you ultimately make all your parenting decisions from what is in their best interest long term. Because if all you do is try to protect them from life, then you make decisions based out of fear and you miss what is in the best long-term interest of your child. But parenting is all about sacrificing short-term for what is in their best interest long-term. Protecting them from life is all about what's in the best interest short-term. And our goal is to be a reflection of God in their life and to point them in the right direction. We cannot protect them from everything that life throws at them. We can do our best to prepare them for what life throws at them. So that's number one. Your job is not to protect them, it's to prepare them. Secondly, you should know this: your top priority as a parent is to retain influence. You want to retain influence in the lives of your kids, so that as they grow, you can speak into the decisions that they're making the older that they get. As your children grow, the control that you can exert becomes less and less, right? And so your top priority is not to exert control, it's to retain influence. Now, here's why that's so important. The older our kids get, the more critical our influence becomes in their lives. The times in their life where they need your influence the most is when they're making decisions that matter the most. When they're in first grade and second grade, the decisions don't carry as much weight, and the consequences of their decisions don't carry as much weight as when they are 16 and 17 and 18 and 22. That's when they need your influence the most. They need your influence when they're choosing how and who to date, when they're navigating sexuality, when they're choosing a career path, when they're choosing who to marry, when they're dealing with issues of ethics and integrity, when they're dealing with decisions about how do I handle myself in different situations. What we must consider as parents is that compliance is not the same as influence. You might be able to get them to do what you want them to do in the moment, but that doesn't mean that you have influence. At the end of the day, what you want is influence in their lives. That's why the Apostle Paul is a guy who lived in the first century. He traveled around the Roman Empire. He would start churches, and then he would write letters back to churches and individuals, and he would describe for them, here's what it looks like to live out the way of Jesus in your different contexts, in your different relationships. And he would write in the church in Ephesus, and he describes husbands and wives, and in their context, he talks to slaves and slave owners, because that was something that they were dealing with in that day, and he talks to parents and children. He talks to every relationship in every context. And here's what he says to parents in this letter to the Ephesian followers of Jesus. He says, "Parents, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather," he offers an alternative. He says, "Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord." You don't have to provoke them or exasperate them, but you can bring them up. And it's possible you can sort of exert control in the life of your kids to the point that you provoke them to anger, to the point that you exasperate them. And they comply with your wishes, but you lose influence. They do what you told them to do, but they can't wait to move out. And you might even be right, and you can write them right out the door. At the end of the day, that's not what you want. So you got to ask yourself, how much is momentary compliance worth when it comes to my level of influence in their life? Now, for us to understand how influence works in the lives of kids, it's critical that we understand what stage of life our kids are in. There's a reason that our 17-year-old drives a car and our 11-year-old doesn't. And it's not because we're unfair as parents, right? It's because they're in different seasons. And so we love our kids the same, but we do not treat our kids the same. So they're all different. They require different things. So my objective is not to be fair. My objective is to prepare them. And this requires different parenting for different phases of life. So I want to walk through this together and show you the different phases of life that some of your kids might be in. We've got a little chart here that I think will help us. Number one is the 0 to 3 years old. Okay, 0 to 3 years old is that first phase of life. And in that first phase of life, from 0 to 3 years old, your role in their life is pretty much as a nurse. Meaning you are feeding them, changing them, and keeping them alive. And that's pretty much it. Right? I mean, there's some fun little, they smile and they're learning to talk. But in terms of like your authority and your friendship in their life, your authority is very little because there's not a whole lot. They're not bucking against. You're not trying to like tell them, here's how life works, right? And your friendship is very little. I mean, you love to hold them and you love to snuggle with them and all that. For most dads, I know this is a broad generalization, but when they hit 2 years old, that's when we start liking them. They start getting a personality. Before that, we're just like, yeah, they're great, whatever. TMI, too much, no, just me? Okay. And here's the reality. In this season, your goal is to keep them alive. Your goal is to feed them. Your goal is this: what goes around comes around. In this season, you wipe their backside, and you're hoping that someday, right, they wipe yours, right? That's the goal. And so there's not a whole lot when it comes to authority and friendship. Now, here's what's really fascinating. You get into this next season of life, 4 to 12 years old, 3 to 12 years old. Here's what happens. Your friendship doesn't go up very much, but your authority has to go way up. It just has to. Your role in that season of life from 3 to 12 years old, you are the king and you are the queen of the castle, and you need to let them know it. And here's why. They are constantly trying to usurp the throne. You know that? They're always trying to overthrow you because they're little sinners. And you know this, like these little gremlins are constantly trying to buck authority because they want to see how far they can push it. They want to see how much they can get away with. I've heard people say this throughout the years, well, we just never tell our kids no. Listen, respectfully, that's stupid. Respectfully. Of course you tell your kids no, right? You're the king, you're the queen, all right? You need to do that. And so what happens is this, parents who don't do that, when you're like, oh, I just want to be friends, I like me, you know what that's rooted in? That's rooted in your well-being, not theirs. And so you're saying, I don't want to be disliked momentarily, and so you'll give up what's in their best interest long-term in order to feel good in the moment. But let me tell you something, that will backfire, okay? Now, you get to the coaching years, this is awesome. Your authority goes way down, and your friendship should go up. Coaching years are from 12 to 18, and this is the season of life where they're the ones with skin on the game. They're the ones making decisions. They're on the field of play, and you're kind of on the sidelines cheering them on and, hopefully shouting some instructions. But they have the freedom to call an audible based on what the defense is throwing at them, right? And then afterwards, you can kind of watch the game film together and be like, see, probably a bad decision, but you have to live with the consequences. It's critical during this season that your authority goes down and that your friendship goes up. Now, this is really self-explanatory. You get to 18 plus, guess what happens to your authority? Bye-bye. Gone. Your authority vanishes altogether. You have zero authority. But hopefully, your friendship then goes up, right? And one of the biggest goals that my wife and I have for our kids is that when they are out of our house, that they would want to be together, that they'd want to hang out with us, and that they would want to hang out with each other when they are no longer required to because of proximity. They don't live in the same house anymore, but they still want to be in the same house together. That's our goal. And so we want to foster anything that promotes that kind of idea. Now, here's where this gets really tricky. Where I've seen parents get into trouble is this. This season, king and queen. This season, when their kids are 3 to 12 years old, and they reverse this. And they want to be friends, but they don't want to really discipline. They don't want to create boundaries. They don't want to do the things that require them to say no to their kids because they want to be liked. And then here's what happens. They get into this stage, and suddenly they realize my kids are really bucking the system. They're really going against my authority. And you know what they do in that season? They clamp down on authority, and their authority goes up, and their friendship goes down in the season where it should be the opposite. That's where it gets really tricky. And the kids start acting out during the coaching years, and suddenly the parents want to buckle down on authority, and they lose influence. See, here's what you have to understand when it comes to influence. The quality of your friendship is what determines your influence. Because if your influence in their lives is based on authority, you can have that for a season, but if you don't make the transition and go, okay, my influence in your life isn't based on the fact that I'm dad and I said so, I'm mom and I said so, but at some point I'm making the transition to, look, I love you and I care about you and I hope that you trust me enough to do what I ask you to do just because, but you have the freedom. If you don't make that transition, here's what you give up in the process. Influence. Influence in their life. They can make some bad decisions along the way, but you actually retain influence if you let them make some bad decisions and then you coach them through it. But if you try to clamp down on authority, you might get them to do what you want them to do in that season, but you sacrifice influence in the process. What happens to those of us who are parents is that as we get older, we can still try to influence them using our authority instead of our friendship. At a certain point in adolescence, it's pretty early on, 12, 13, 14, your kids have become very familiar with your worldview. They've become very familiar with your opinions. They know how you would do things, and they don't need your advice as much as they need you to listen and let them process, to help them through it. And the way that you retain influence isn't by giving them all the answers or fixing all their problems. That's what authority tries to do. The way you retain influence is you maintain a good relationship, because the quality of your relationship will always determine the weight of your influence. So that's the tension. This is the needle that we have to thread as parents. Early on, early childhood, it's based on authority. You have high authority, and you're trying to protect them, keep them alive, right? But then there has to be this shift where later on, as they get into adolescence and beyond, parenting is based on relationship, and the goal is influence. And if you don't make that shift, in the words of the Apostle Paul, you will exasperate or provoke your kids to anger, and you lose influence in their lives. So how do you do that? How do you thread that needle? How do you make sure that you can set some guidelines and boundaries and discipline your kids along the way? At the same time, give them enough freedom and support to become who God's created them to be. Well, let me give you a few principles here. Number one, set healthy boundaries. You see, making sure that you have influence and retaining influence through relationship, it doesn't mean that you just take your hand off the wheel and let them do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. When children are given no boundaries and no discipline, a very strange thing happens. They do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it, and then they become extremely frustrated when they find themselves unhappy. You know why? Because kids don't always know what's best for themselves, do they? Like, kids don't know if I watch 12 hours straight of Teen Titans Go and only eat Little Debbie snacks, it might not make me as happy as I think it will, right? They don't know that. My 11-year-old has never come up to me and been like, Dad, it's 7:30. Do you know where my vitamins are? Because I think I need to get to bed early tonight. Never happened. But sometimes it's what he needs, right? And so in Proverbs 19, King Solomon writes this nearly 3,000 years ago. He says, discipline your children while there is still hope of influencing their future. That actually creating healthy boundaries is in their best interest long term. That it actually helps you have influence in their lives to influence their future. He says, otherwise, so as not to play a part in their destruction. If you let them do whatever they want to do and you take your hands off the wheel, it's actually destructive to our kids. It's incredibly important that we provide delicate discipline in the lives of our kids, because the scriptures teach us to withhold discipline in their life can lead to their destruction. Love and discipline go hand in hand. You cannot love your child if discipline is not a part of the process. Now, I want to give them as much freedom as possible to become everything God's created them to be without sacrificing their future in the process. It's a delicate tension. Now, one practical way that we've done this is we start from a position of yes. This is the default setting. Dad, can I? Mom, can I? Dad, can we? I want to say yes to all the dad, can I, and mom, can I questions. So we will always start with yes unless there is a very good reason to say no. And then when there is a good reason to say no, we say no, and we tell our kids, here's the reason. Now, they may not like it, they may not agree with it, but it's always clear. And so it's never just this vague, I just don't feel like it. No, we want to start with yes, unless there's a good reason to say no. And when it's no, we'll tell you what that is. That teaches them that there's consequences to their decisions, right? That's one of the most practical ways we can do this. Also, biblical discipline isn't about punishment. It's about encouragement. It's not something you do to your children. It's something you do for your children. It's a way for you to say, man, I want to instruct you so that you can grow. So let's talk about this along the way. But you've got to set healthy boundaries because it lets them know there is consequences to life. There is cause and effect. If this, then this. This is how life works. That's how you prepare them for life, not just protect them from life. Secondly, what do you do when they break those, right? I've set healthy boundaries, but they've crossed those healthy boundaries. They've pushed the limit. Can I encourage you with this? Let the consequences do the screaming. And I'm telling you, this is the tendency for all of us, myself included, the tendency for us when our kids push against those boundaries or break those boundaries. The tendency for us is to get frustrated and sort of power up and yell at them. And I just got to tell you, and I'll tell you this, and you probably already know this, it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyways. And you can just gasp in amazement and wonder at how deep this is. Yelling at your kids doesn't work. I'll just give you a moment. I'll let that sink in. And I'm telling you, it probably does more to erode influence in the life of your kids. And I'm telling you that as someone who's had a lot of practice yelling at their kids, okay? And it just doesn't work. My kids have never come up to me and been like, Dad, listen, I just didn't understand what you were saying, but when you started screaming it, then I got it. They'll never hear what you're saying if they're afraid of how you're saying it. But you know what they do hear? They hear your spirit. And when we're the ones yelling at our kids, here's what we communicate. It's not intentionally, but here's what we communicate. Calm me down. My emotional responses are dependent on your behavior. So as long as you comply and do what I want you to do, then I will be calm. But if you don't, then I will lose it. And I'm not sure that abdicating responsibility of our own emotional response to the youngest people in the room is the best way for us to prepare our kids for life. And so, Solomon again writes this in Proverbs. He says, fools are quick to express their anger. Guilty. But wise people are patient and control themselves. We want to be wise parents. Foolish parenting protects our kids but doesn't prepare them. Wise parenting prepares our kids for life. If the depth of your relationship determines your influence, then yelling and becoming emotional to somehow get your kids to do what you want them to do, it's only going to erode influence in the long haul. So let the consequences do the screaming. Here's what that looks like. That means when my kid does something that I'm frustrated with and they go against the rules, what ends up happening is it feels very much like parent versus kid, doesn't it? The way that you let the consequences do the screaming is you go, okay, it's mom and kid, dad and kid, parent and kid versus the consequence. You get on the other side of it. In other words, discipline as your kids get older is found in expressing this one simple phrase: oh no. That's it. Looks like this: oh no. Oh, I hate that you have to pay that speeding ticket. Yeah, no, I'm bummed for you. I know, I hate that. Man. Oh no. I know you really wanted to go to that party this weekend, but we all agreed that you would be home at a certain time, and if you weren't, this would be the consequence. I hate that for you. No, I'm not punished. I'm with you. I'm just as bummed as you are. Oh no. Gosh, I'm so bummed that you did poorly and have to retake that test. Yeah, no, I'm not punishing you. I hate that for you, right? And here's what you're doing. You're going, look, I just want you to know, I'm not screaming at you. I'm not even punishing you. I'm on your side. But you need to know that your decisions have consequences. And there's clear consequences that are attached to the offense. And you let the consequences do the screaming. And you're not even enforcing those things. These are just the natural consequences of life. But I'm for you and I'm not against you, and I'm siding with you against those things that would ultimately harm you. See, any discipline is not about retribution. It's about restoration. It's about saying, look, did you see what you did wrong here? How do we do better the next time around? This is exactly what God did with us. And if we can understand these seasons of parenting, these phases of development in the lives of our kids, then we can retain influence in their life during the 18 plus years, during the later season. And can I tell you something about the later season? Later is longer. Think about it. Later is longer. Your discipline and your training and your coaching is like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years. I mean, depending on how many kids you have, And then the relationship with your kids, 18 plus, hopefully is, 30, 40, 50 years. Later is longer. The amount of time from 0 to 15 is nothing compared to the season of life, 18 plus. So what do you need to do during these early seasons so that you can enjoy this much longer later season? See, you got to set healthy boundaries, let the consequences do the screaming. And finally, one last principle that I think is so helpful. You always affirm identity as you address behavior. Affirm identity as you address behavior. Words are very powerful. We remember words that are spoken to us that are like pointed and positive, but we also remember words that are negative and scarring. Again, the book of Proverbs has a lot to say about words. All through the scriptures, we discover this. King Solomon says it so well. Thoughtless words can wound as deeply as any sword, but wisely spoken words can heal. All through the scriptures, we are reminded our words have power for good and bad, for good and evil. Our words are extremely, extremely powerful. And when we are careless with our words, we can wound our kids. Experience reveals that what is written in the scriptures is true when it comes to this idea. And one of the most common mistakes we make as parents is that we use modifiers or labels to describe our kids' behavior and not enough positive words to describe their identity. We need to affirm their identity even as we address the behavior. It kind of looks like this, right? We use these modifiers to describe them, and parents introduce their daughter and they go, this is Jill, she's our shy one, as Jill cowers behind mom's leg because she's been introduced that way 1,000 times, This is Jimmy, he's our wild child, as Jimmy lights a tree on fire. Our words have power, right? Words spoken by parents help shape our identity. And a lot of language that's directed at kids is based on behavior and not identity. It's based on their behavior. And so we have a lot of adults walking around the world who need all kinds of approval because growing up, all of the words that were directed at them weren't about their identity, they were about their behavior, good or bad. You shouldn't have done that. Shame on you, shame on you. Here's what you did. You missed the mark. Oh, I'm so proud of you because you did this well, you did that well, I'm so proud of you. And a lot of it was so based on behavior that now all of their identity is wrapped up on whether or not they do well or they do poorly. And they need lots of affirmation. Let's face it, kids are gonna fail a lot. And so we've gotta figure out how to affirm their identity even as we address their behavior. There's a big difference between this is who you are and this is what you've done. And the moment that you said yes to following Jesus, if you've said yes to following God, the moment that you said yes to God's grace, God says, you're my son, you're my daughter. That's the identity he gives you. And your identity isn't about anything that you've done. In God's eyes, he does not look at you through the lens of here's what you've done. I'm proud of you because, or you missed the mark, shame on you because. When God looks at you, he goes, that's my son, that's my daughter, that's who I see. That's your identity. Think about that. He sees us as his children. He declares all of these beautiful and incredible things about us, even though our behavior hasn't lined up with that. But he gives us a brand new identity. In fact, the Apostle Paul, he's writing to followers of Jesus in the first century Roman Empire. He puts it in these words. He says, so you have not received a spirit that makes you fearful slaves. Instead, you received God's Spirit when he adopted you as his own children. Now we call him Abba, Father, for his Spirit joins with our spirit to affirm we are God's children. The minute we became God's children, he says, you're loved, you're righteous, you're without blemish, you're filled with the fullness of God's Spirit, and on and on and on and on. And yet we don't even look at ourselves that way. But God sees in us the identity that he has given us as a part of his family, and he declares it to be true even when our behavior doesn't line up with those things. And in that, we find this incredible principle in parenting. Always affirm identity. Make all of your you are statements positive. And then address behavior. When you have to talk negatively, this is about what you did. This is who you are, and this is what you did. You are such a smart kid, but what you did wasn't thought through. You are so kind and so loving, but this particular thing that you did, it wasn't very kind. I know that you want to be the type of person, like this is who God created you to be, is somebody who puts others first. But what you did was you chose yourself over someone else in this particular instance. And the contrast between this is who you are and this is who God created you to be and this is what you did is what changes us from the inside out. It's what shapes a child. This is your identity. This is who God created you to be, and this is what you did. We affirm identity even as we address behavior. This is what God did with us. He piles it all up on the front end. You're holy, you're righteous, you're blameless, you're my child, but what you have done isn't consistent with who I've created you to be. And in that, we find grace. And at the end of the day, retaining influence in the lives of our kids is the best way to prepare them for life. So here's how you do it. Set healthy boundaries. Let the consequences do the screaming. And affirm their identity even as you address their behavior. And if you do that, you will retain influence in their lives. You will help prepare them for adulthood. And ultimately, you will be a reflection of our Heavenly Father in their lives. For some of you, this is exactly what God wants to do with you today. That you've never experienced this, you're my son, you're my daughter, from a God who created you and a God who loves you. And so at the right time in human history, God sent Jesus into the world to show his love for us. And Jesus took all of our past behavior, all of our sin, all of our brokenness, all of our shame, every area in life that we fall short and feel like we don't measure up, took it upon himself. He allowed himself to be put to death on a cross. And when he died, all of our sin and shame and brokenness died with him. His body was laid in a tomb, and according to multiple eyewitness accounts, hundreds of people saw Jesus alive again, which means this: he can overcome death. That death is not the end, and there's more to this life than this life, and you and I have been invited to be a part of God's family, to be adopted into his family, made his son, made his daughter. That the way he looks at us isn't through the past and our behavior, but through a new identity that he gives us. And if you've never said yes to that, I want to invite you to do that today. For others of you, I want to encourage you to do this. Maybe you'd say, what's one thing that I could take away from this talk today and begin to apply in my parenting, begin to apply with kids whose lives I have influence? Others of you, it's just this. All right, here's my next step. I'm going to just come back for this series. I'm going to come back for the next 3 weeks. What have I got to lose? But if your next step is to say, I want to say yes to following Jesus, would you pray this prayer with me? God, thank you that you sent Jesus into the world. Thank you that you want to adopt me into your family. God, I want to say yes to your invitation. Forgive my sins. Make me a part of your family. Make me your son. Make me your daughter. And help me as I move forward. Help me to put my trust in you. Help me to follow you as best as I know how from this moment on. Thank you for loving me. And God, I pray for all of us who are parents, grandparents, God, foster parents, step parents, God, just co-parents, all of the relationships that we have and the influence that we have in the lives of kids. May we remember our identity first and foremost as your children. May we affirm that identity in the kids in whose lives we have influence. And as we do that, may we point them to you. God, we thank you for today. We pray this in your name. Amen.